Boris Johnson says he didn't fully understand the consequences of his own Brexit deal for Northern Ireland, but also says he doesn't think he can support the new deal either. So what do the people here in Sunderland, who voted in numbers to leave the EU back in 2016, what do they make of it all? Sunderland, of course, is in the northeast of England, a city dominated for decades by Labour, and is home to the country's largest car plant, Nissan. We'll also be discussing, do Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages reveal what was really going on in government during the pandemic? And why, when energy prices are going down, are our bills going up? I can tell you there are a lot of strong opinions in the room tonight. Welcome to Question Time. On our panel tonight, from the UK government, Graham Stuart. He's been MP for Beverley and Holderness in East Yorkshire since 2005 and served in Liz Truss's short-lived cabinet last year. He's now Minister in the new Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. From Labour, Jonathan Reynolds is the Shadow Secretary for Business and Industrial Strategy. He also chairs the parliamentary group Christians on the Left, and born just a few miles down the road from here is also a Mackem, a faithful follower of Sunderland AFC. Kirsty Blackman is one of the Scottish National Party's 44-strong contingent at Westminster. The Aberdeen North MP is the SNP's Cabinet Office spokesperson, having previously been their deputy leader in the House of Commons. She hasn't yet said who she's backing to be new leader of her party and Scotland's First Minister. Juergen Maier is an Austro-British industrialist and business advisor. Born in Germany, he moved to England as a child in the 70s. His sizable CV includes former CEO of Siemens UK and he's current vice chair of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. And it's fair to say Tom Harwood's been committed to the cause of right-wing politics and Brexit since his student days, which weren't that long ago. He's worked for Guido Fawkes' website, as well as being a regular contributor to the Daily Telegraph, and he is now deputy political editor at GB News. Good evening. Welcome to our panel. Welcome to our audience here in Sunderland, which of course reflects the electoral support for our political parties for whichever nation we are in. Of course, tonight we're in England. And welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation the usual way on social media. It gets pretty lively. Let's hear what you've got to say at BBC Question Time. Right. Let's kick off with our first question from Michael Jobling.
Were we, the people of Sunderland, wrong to vote to leave the EU, given that Northern Ireland is now the world's most exciting economic zone?
Yes, so these are the words of Rishi Sunak. Northern Ireland is in the unbelievably special position, a unique position in the entire world. Nobody else has what it has. It is the world's most exciting economic zone. Graham.
Well, in answer to your question, Michael, you were right to do what you wanted to do, which was vote for an independent, self-governed United Kingdom. The grit since has been the way the Northern Ireland Protocol was applied, and I was temporarily in the period when, just before Liz Truss became Prime Minister, I was the Europe Minister, and I had to engage with the European counterparts.
And that was when it was, according to Rishi Sunak, when it seems a terrible deal.
Well, that's when we were working. It was partly about the way it was applied. It was partly about some of the difficulties. On the face of it, it said what it had to do, and it clearly wasn't working. And it said on the face of the protocol, it said if it's not working, it might need to be changed. And if that doesn't work, it might need to be replaced. It actually said that on the face of it. So.
But I think what's behind Michael's question is given that Northern Ireland, tell me if I'm wrong, Michael, but given that Northern's now being described as the world's most exciting economic zone, what about the rest of the UK?
Well, the UK overall is in a strong position, I believe, going forward. We are...
But clearly not as good as Northern Ireland, because that's described as the world's most exciting economic zone.
Well, because it is an integral part of the United Kingdom, and we're going to see no more of sausages and supermarket goods that were barred from going into Northern Ireland. From now on, it's about the people of Northern Ireland.
But that's not really answering the question, Graham. If Northern Ireland is the world's most exciting economic zone, presumably we're not as exciting.
We
are at a disadvantage.
It is the only part of the United Kingdom that shares a border with the EU. It has special circumstances. Why is it able to have the best of the UK situation and our independence and still have the best of access entirely to the EU? Because everyone has agreed we must protect peace in Northern Ireland and on the island of Ireland. That's why it's a special situation.
All right.
That's why I think it's a real triumph of the Prime Minister that he's pulled this off when many, including somebody like me who worked on it, wasn't sure that it would be possible.
Let's hear from you, Michael, because you've asked this question. If you don't mind me asking, how did you vote in the 2016 referendum?
To leave.
And so, what do you think now?
I think basically it's been a complete mess from the beginning. If we aren't...
And actually, Michael, before you go on, I should say that more people... Because we're in Sunderland, which was the second city to declare on the night of 2016, and with a sizable majority to leave, more people in this audience voted to leave the EU than not. So, sorry, do go on.
It just goes to show that, as I said, that they've messed it up from the beginning, that the economic downturn is very clearly related to the EU, and even the Prime Minister, by his words, believes that. So somewhere along the line, they've completely lied. They've sold us the wrong thing. It wasn't this so-called oven ready, or it wasn't. So it's just been a mess. And if obviously it was to go again, I'm likely to change my vote.
Jonathan, I'll come to you in a minute. You are a Remainer, so presumably you agree with Michael.
Well, I'd be likely to change my opinion. I think of the parallel with...
What, you've turned into a Leaver now?
Well, I was arguing on the economics that there was a cost, and I wasn't sure what that would be, and that's why I argued for Remain. When you look at the polling, most people didn't vote because they thought there was some instant economic windfall. They voted because they wanted a more self-governed United Kingdom. If you'd said to George Washington, do you know you're leaving the world's greatest empire? You may have a small percentage loss of GDP, therefore you shouldn't do it. He would have laughed at you. He'd have said, we are going to have a self-governed United States and we will make a success of it. And that is what I think
well, hang on, they wanted to be independent. I mean, we were already an independent nation, so I'm not quite sure that stands up to scrutiny.
But we were being subsumed into ever greater control from the centre in Brussels, undoubtedly so, and people thought that we could succeed as an independent nation outside the EU. And I think they're going to be proved right.
Jonathan.
Look, first of all, it is great to be doing Question Time in Sunderland, but actually this is the fire station my dad used to work in as well, so it is... Anyway, thank you very much.
Can I just say, we were laying bets as to how long it would take Jonathan to mention that, and he beat all of us, actually. Go on.
Brilliant. Well, to answer Michael's question, look, Michael, it depends on what you wanted, and people who voted the same way actually wanted at times very different things. It was why it was such a hard moment for the country, and I understand some people will be upset. They'll think the Prime Minister was crass to describe the advantages Northern Ireland does now have in that way. But I think... But
presumably, because you are also a Remainer, you agree with him. And you must agree with Michael.
There is no doubt...
But politically, you just can't admit it.
There is no... I can admit it, Northern Ireland has distinct advantages. Northern Ireland has distinct advantages as part of the UK, and it's got access to the single market. That is an advantage. There is no doubt about that. But Northern Ireland does have a particular status in the UK. The Good Friday Agreement is something everyone in this country should celebrate and cherish, and it needed these amendments to the deal. The deal wasn't oven ready. We all know that. But look, we could go on with this debate. It could potentially... It could never end, OK? And I honestly say to everyone, how long would we be willing to do that for? Even if people want to change their vote and relive that referendum. The uncertainty...
Do you want to do that?
No, I don't, because if you look at one of the biggest problems the UK faces, you know, we have the lowest business investment of any major economy in the G7. The uncertainty that would cause, because don't forget, dissatisfaction with how it's going doesn't mean people want to relive the whole thing, and you've got to bear that in mind. I think what this deal does do is get rid of a serious problem that was in the way of a better negotiated relationship with the European Union, that we can deliver in good faith if we're willing to do that, on things like science and on food exports and on our creative industries in the UK being able to tour in Europe. We, in the Labour Party, that is what we will try and achieve. It's not going back to the original debate, but we can improve things a great deal and maybe satisfy Michael and everyone in the room, no matter how they voted.
Well, let's hear from some more people in the room. And yes, the woman there in the flowery dress.
If Brexit has given us this so-called economic growth that we're supposedly trying to see, why, firstly, is the automotive industry on its knees? Ford have lost jobs, Honda have lost jobs, Toyota have lost jobs, Nissan are repositioning some of their work to France because they're part of Renault, and also, why haven't we got any tomatoes on our supermarket shelves when Spain and France have got an abundance?
All right. The person right at the back in the hat.
We talk about independence and so many different reasons for voting to leave the EU. But the most worrying thing is even bigger than the economy. It is the insistence on Britain having its own Bill of Rights, as a non-binary person whose friends are largely transgender, our rights are being constantly attacked, not only by the Conservative Party, but also the Labour Party, who insist that either we're not old enough to make decisions for ourselves, or that we shouldn't be allowed in public spaces. We are being legislated out of existence, and a British Bill of Rights would guarantee not just being out of public life, but out of life altogether.
Okay. Woman there in the blue scarf.
I just wanted to say, why does everyone keep having this obsession that Sunderland is the highest vote leave? I'm sick of hearing it. I'm from Sunderland.
No, I didn't say you were the highest vote leave. I said that you were the second city to declare.
Okay, but that's what it's always pitched on these programmes. Let's come and see all the silly Brexiteers in Sunderland.
Are you suggesting that I was saying that? Because I certainly wasn't.
It's always the impression that all television programmes give. And almost 40% of people here voted Remain. And it's only because we called it first. Everyone thinks we're the highest. So can we just please have some clarity on that?
We can. But certainly we didn't claim that on this programme tonight, just to be completely clear.
Thank you.
So, Tom, so Michael's question, were we, the people of Sunderland, wrong voting to leave, given that Northern Ireland is now described by the Prime Minister, no less, as the world's most exciting economic zone?
I don't think we should take much credence in the Prime Minister trying to oversell a deal that he's done with the European Union. Clearly there's
So you don't believe that?
No, I think that, firstly, we should look at the quote in its full length, which is talking not only about access to the EU market, but also
Northern Ireland is in the
half.
unbelievably special position, a unique position in the entire world. And the European continent has privileged access, not just the UK home market, but also the EU single market. Nobody else has that. No one. Only you guys, only here. That is the prize.
Yeah, he's overselling it. What the crucial part of this is, though, the UK market is obviously a huge, huge market for Northern Ireland. It's in our internal market. And the reason why Brexit offers opportunities, many of which have not yet been realised because we have thousands upon thousands of EU laws still in our statute books. We have not yet pursued the regulatory divergence that is the prize of Brexit, being able to do things differently. The reason why that's an exciting opportunity is because the EU passes new laws every day. Ever since we've left, they've continued to regulate themselves. And we've got an opportunity to do things differently, more dynamically, with our life sciences sector, for example. We've got so many growth opportunities by becoming this sort of regulatory sandbox. Now, the problem is, if you're in the EU single market, you can't make those rules. You can't cut your own VAT on so many issues. You can't sign your own independent trade deals around the world. You can't levy your own tariffs. You can't sanction your own Russian oligarchs.
Yes, but we know now
so
that
now
we
can do that because we've left the single market. These are material opportunities that are open to us. It's one of the reasons we've been able to lead so well on Ukraine. It's one of the reasons why this country has been able to stand pretty proud, whether it's our vaccine rollout, whether it's actually the ability of coming out of what was a terrible, terrible time for the world. 2 years of lockdowns and of pandemics and of death. We are just emerging from that now, and I think it would be remiss, it would be wrong to try and look at our economic situation right now and say, this is all to do with a vote that happened in 2016. Look at what's happened since then. Look at the 2017 election, the political uncertainty, the fact that we almost had a Marxist become our Chancellor of the Exchequer. That scares off business investment. We can't look at this thing as if it's only one issue.
Okay.
There are so many different issues that all factor in here.
Kirsty. So, Kirsty, you were waggling your eyebrows throughout that.
I'm pretty good at that, actually. I am so annoyed by this whole debate. I mean, we're sitting here talking about the fact that Northern Ireland is the most exciting economic zone, right? Well, the thing is, our economic zone previously was better. Our economic zone previously, we were members of the single market, all of us. And we now have a situation where Northern Ireland has, and I'm absolutely glad that they have got a deal, and that's great.
And that's one that the SNP supports.
But they have got a competitive advantage over Scotland. They've got a competitive advantage over Sunderland. No matter what people voted for, no matter what decisions and reasons when they went through and put that X in that box, not one person voted to make themselves poorer. Not one. And Tom's talking about the economic impact that there is of COVID, an absolutely massive economic impact. The OBR estimates the economic impact of Brexit is twice that of COVID, twice as bad a hit as COVID. And that's the OBR's figures. Now, I completely agree on the subject of
that's the
tomatoes.
Office for Budget Responsibility, those you're not.
You know, Graham's
who were
talking...
30 billion out, of course,
Graham's talking about the fact that we can now get sausages from Northern Ireland. Well, right now, I would quite like some tomatoes. A lot of people would quite like some tomatoes. My children will only eat cucumbers. That is the only vegetable they will eat. And there are no cucumbers in any of the shops. But you're totally right. The fact that they're not rationing them in Spain, they're not rationing them in France.
But they are rationing them in Ireland. Ireland, which is a member of the single market, has the same tomato problem that the United Kingdom has. How do you work that one out?
It's always Brexit. You should just realise it's always Brexit.
But the thing is that we've got the lowest growth predicted in the G7. If the lowest growth predicted in the G7, and it's not because of Brexit.
Who had the largest growth? Who had the largest growth last year?
What are you doing wrong then?
What are we doing
the
wrong?
year before
This
last?
Conservative... Hang on. Your government is raising corporation tax to the same level that it is in France, twice the level it is in Ireland. Maybe you should think about that if you're trying to complain about economic growth. Maybe that's the other factor here.
All right. Let's hear a bit from Juergen. I'm going to come to you in a minute. Let's hear a bit more. Yes, the guy in the grey sweatshirt.
So Scotland voted to remain, and they don't get a prize, which Richie...
You mean, which is what's being described in Northern Ireland?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? OK.
England chose to leave, and it was meant to be this big, massive, great big prize, but I don't see a prize. I just see shortages of food and gas bills skyrocketing.
Apparently your prize is parliamentary autonomy.
Oh, yes.
You know, which is great. That's really going to pay your gas bill.
Let me hear from the woman at the back there with the necklace and the dark sweater.
Funny enough, it literally is, because the energy subsidy that the United Kingdom government has done to respond to these energy crises is illegal in the European Union under their state aid rules. That's why Northern Ireland had to have a different scheme. Up until this point, up until this deal, Northern Ireland had to have an entirely different scheme than the energy price guarantee because EU rules made that illegal. There are so many examples of things where
countries have subsidised energy bills in a different way.
In a completely different way. The UK energy subsidy is the largest, and there are many criticisms that you can make of it.
I appreciate your passion, but I've just got to bring other people in as well. Yes, the woman in the dark sweater with the necklace. Yes, you.
The comments Tom makes are often in this sort of abstract and sometimes very hard as a talk show host to sort of follow on these programmes and verify instantly. I think one of the things that's really important for the North East, where I've lived for 31 years, across Durham, Sunderland, Gateshead, Newcastle, and a little bit into Northumberland for a short while, what's really important is the communities, the social cohesion. And without the EU Social Fund, the communities up here will be left even further behind. So much of the good stuff that's happened here has happened thanks to the vision which England was part of, or representatives of England, in distributing money into places that Westminster, the Tory government, have never, ever done. And, you know, this is really important.
OK, thank you. The man here in the front, the black sweatshirt.
Yeah, just a point for me. When Boris was stood in his kitchen with his apron on, about to put the chicken into the oven, which was already pre-cooked.
This is quite an image you're conjuring up us here, if I may say.
The fundamental point I don't understand about the Northern Irish piece, it's like the Good Friday Agreement. It's all about the people. Therefore, when he sat and negotiated with the EU, why weren't the Assembly part of that? Because fundamentally from day one, they've never agreed with it, and look where we are. Once again, the Tory party making decisions on behalf of people without actually bringing them to the table. The most important people are us.
OK. Thank you. Juergen, you've been very patient. Let's hear from you.
Indeed, I have. And, look, I mean, I do totally agree with you, Michael, that... you know, it's been far from the promises that were made, and the 3 years that we've been through have been an absolute mess. But I'm actually going to be positive about the place where we've arrived at, more positive than the debate we've just been having. And that is that one of the things that has really worried me is this breakdown of trust that we've had between ourselves and the European Union. And I think what Rishi Sunak has been able to do is to actually rebuild some of that trust. And I think we've moved forward. And I think there is now a possibility to have conversations and to deliver what has been delivered in Northern Ireland and say, look, can we now have a sensible conversation about England, Scotland and Wales also having that same privilege as Northern Ireland. And I can tell you, you are absolutely right that Tom is being abstract. In the practical sense, I don't know of a business that is a trading and an exporting business, and I've worked for a very large one, that believes that diverging from regulation from the European Union makes sense. Because what that actually does is it creates more cost, it creates more bureaucracy, and that's exactly what we've learnt since we've left the European Union. We've got red tape coming out of our ear holes as businesses in the UK. So let's now continue the new chapter, as the Prime Minister called it, and have an honest, decent conversation about alignment of regulation and about being close to the single market and having proper, frictionless access like we were promised originally.
OK. I'm going to take another question, but before I do, I just want to tell you where we're going to be next week, in case you want to come and be part of the audience. Question Time is going to be in London, and the week after that we're in Warrington. So if you live in or around London or in and around Warrington, you want to come and be part of the audience, apply to the Question Time website. The address is here on the screen, and you can come and be part of the programme, and we would love to see you. Right. Alan Doherty, you're up next.
Good evening, panel. Is it disclosure of Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages the smoking gun for what really happened during the pandemic?
There's been a lot to read, hasn't there?
There has, yes.
A lot of words. Was it 100,000 WhatsApp messages? Is it the smoking gun for what was really going on? Jonathan.
Well, thank you for your question, Alan. I think first thing to say is when we're dealing with this, very conscious that for a lot of families in this country, this is about the loss of a loved one. It deserves a seriousness, a solemnity in describing what we have learnt this week. There are a lot of concerns from the information that's been put in the public domain, I think particularly around care homes, where a lot of people's lived experience in this country didn't match what came out from government ministers at the time. But, Alan, what I would say is what everyone in this country deserves is an accurate, unbiased account of what happened, not necessarily to blame people, but to understand how we reacted to this, how we could do it better in future, maybe learn some lessons from that. And I don't think that can be done from what we know already, because I think the information that we have seen is obviously it's selective at the minute. We don't know the full story, and that makes it very difficult. What I do think everyone in the country really needs is that accurate, unbiased process, reporting sooner and on a timescale which is much faster than what we've seen at the minute. I mean, the inquiry was announced, I think, in May 2021. It took a year to get the terms of reference. There's been no formal hearings. No one's given any evidence. No politicians have been able to do that. And I don't think that's good enough. When you look at what's happened in other countries, many of them have already actually finished with their inquiry and reported. So I think rather than make a judgment on what we've seen so far in the papers, I would say, look, let's have the full picture, but let's have it before the end of this year, and then let's make that decision.
Graham, has it been embarrassing to read these WhatsApps, having out in the public domain? You've got Matt Hancock describing teaching unions as absolute arses. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with...
Do you agree with that?
Sorry, with that
calling
particular
teaching
comment?
unions absolute arses?
No.
And what about the other thing? So when you've got Matt Hancock talking about not testing everyone that comes into care homes because it would muddy the waters. We can't quite know what that means, and he says it does not mean that he didn't want to do it, it just says he couldn't do it because the capacity wasn't there. But when you read these things, what are you thinking?
Well, I agree with Jonathan that what we need, this is such a serious, I mean, with such a convulsion of the nation, so many people lost lives, it disrupted the whole nation, the economy, people's everyday lives, their liberty. This needs to be looked at properly. And that's why we have an independent inquiry. And in terms of, we'd all like to hear from it sooner rather than later, but it's an independent inquiry. We've got to let it decide. It has access to all this information.
But in the meantime, we've got all these WhatsApp messages and what they are, and they are clearly a partial account. They're only Matt Hancock's messages, and there's a limit to how much we can read into them. But what they do appear to paint is ministers briefing against other ministers. Hancock talks about fighting a rearguard action against the then Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Is that how it should be done? We're in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, Fiona, you're the journalist, so you know what journalists look for, and that's what they put in the papers. But there's 3 St James Bibles worth of messages from one man who was working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. He will have made mistakes, he would admit it, as well as other things. What I think you would get if you were fair and you weren't selectively splashing in a newspaper, you would get the impression of people who were working absolutely flat out and determinedly to save lives and try and find the right answer. And all of you will remember, do you remember when we'd have a sense of certainty about how things should be, and then 3 weeks later, the facts would change again, and every time you thought you knew what we should do, you'd find yourself in a different position. It was extremely difficult. They worked extraordinarily hard under immense pressure. And if you were to go into any of our personal, if you had tapes of everything we'd all ever said, you could selectively make us all look bad and pick out things that the wrong thing. That's why you need, as Jonathan said, we need to hear from the independent inquiry. Personally, I suppose as a government minister, I shouldn't have a personal thought, but I think having signed a non-disclosure agreement, having promised to protect and use the information given, I can't help feeling that the journalist in this case did betray that and trying to say the public interest. If these were secret and this inquiry couldn't get at it, then fair enough. But that's not the situation, and therefore it just seems gratuitous to me.
I mean, Isabel Oakeshott isn't here. We did ask her to come on the programme. She's been doing many media interviews today, so she couldn't come all the way up to Sunderland. What she has said is she's claiming this was in the public interest. Yeah. That's why she did it. Juergen.
Well, it doesn't pass the smell test, does it? But look, I live in some hope, because I can't actually believe that despite all of the chaos at the time, that these massively important decisions, like do we test people going in and out of care homes, do we open, close schools, that these decisions were being made via WhatsApp. I just can't believe it. You know, if you're a business leader, and I hope if you're any leader, you're trained in crisis management, and these decisions are made in crisis management meetings, where all the experts are assembled, minutes of the meeting are taken, and then the decision is made and it's noted down. If that's the process you follow, you may still make the wrong decision, but at least you followed a process and you can rationally say why you've made it. And that's all what Matt Hancock now needs to tell us. But I do agree with you, Graham, and Jonathan, let's not do that via the media or WhatsApp. Let's let the proper inquiry, let's accelerate the inquiry, make sure it's independent. Let's see that these meetings that I'm talking about were really happening, decisions were made properly, and let's find out the truth. And I can tell you, if Matt Hancock was making these decisions via WhatsApp, he is in deep trouble.
The woman in the maroon sweater, yes.
Well, I fully agree with Jonathan that we should wait for the inquiry to find out what we could do in future. And, you know, we hope this won't happen again, but the experts say that it could. However, going to what Juergen's saying, my query is, why do ministers believe that WhatsApp, which we all know is prone to leakages, why would ministers choose to use that form of communication?
Well, in this case, Matt Hancock handed over all his WhatsApp messages. They weren't breached. It wasn't security, but he handed them all over to Isabel Oakeshott.
Right. Is that arrogance or stupidity or just sheer carelessness on his part?
Well, they were writing a book. That's how she got them. Yes, the woman here in the front.
I'd just like to touch on the comments around the teachers' union. My mum's a teacher. Incredibly proud of her. She worked so hard throughout the pandemic, including in person every other week. I'd like it to be known that teaching is a very female-heavy profession, 75% female, and I do wonder if there's a feminist issue here as well. Would Matt Hancock and Gavin Williamson be making similar comments about industries that are more male-dominated?
So Gavin Williamson So Gavin Williamson said, I mean, of course, and these are WhatsApp, you know, to be fair, these are WhatsApp messages that they thought were private and are in the heat of the moment. But this is what Gavin Williamson said of teachers. I know they really do just hate work. I mean, his wife is a teacher, it's worth pointing out.
Mum was in work.
Oh, we're talking about unions, sorry, rather than teachers, sorry. Yes. Forgive me.
They don't hate work,
unions.
They work constantly. Even now, she's working at the weekend. She doesn't... Teachers have summer holidays, all this holiday. She doesn't. She's working constantly 4 days every other week she was teaching in person, and if she wasn't doing that, she was online preparing materials, doing stuff like that. She worked throughout, and as I said, I think there is a question around feminism and misogyny here as well.
Okay, all right. The man in the white top towards the back there. Yeah. Yes, you, sir.
Yeah. You know what sickens me most about this whole thing? I saw a picture of Hancock and Oakeshott with Hancock's book, Pandemic Diaries, which was serialised in the Mail, I think, and he was paid $48,000 for that, and probably gets money from the sale of the book, but thankfully, I think it flopped. How have we got a system that allows a Member of Parliament, who was a serving minister at the time of the pandemic, how is he allowed to write a book? What have the Members of Parliament on the panel got to say about that?
OK, I'm going to come round a bit. OK, should Members of Parliament be able to write books about their experiences, yes or no?
Yes.
OK, Jonathan?
No, absolute disgrace.
Should
Wait for the inquiry.
Should they be able
Everyone
to
should
write
wait for
books
the
about
inquiry.
their... Should Members of Parliament be able to write books about their own experiences?
Not while they're Members of Parliament.
All right. Well, listen, Kirsty, let me come to the question then, which is the disclosure of Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages the smoking gun for what really happened during the pandemic?
So I think for an awful lot of us, this will be the biggest thing that has ever happened in our lives. This is the thing that generations to come, our grandchildren, grandchildren's grandchildren, will be talking about, and will be talking about the experiences that we went through, because so many people lost people during the course of that. Our lives were changed forever, no matter if things have largely gone back to some level of normality. It's different from what that normality looked like before. And so I think that it's really important that we do have the independent inquiry. I think it's really important that we do have, and we're having a separate independent inquiry in Scotland as well.
But that isn't the question. Are his messages a smoking gun for what was really going on?
So I don't know what was going on in those rooms. I think very few people do know what was going on in those rooms. I think absolutely there were mistakes made. Everybody made mistakes. Nobody was well enough prepared for this to happen. What we did and what we focused on, and you saw Nicola Sturgeon standing there on television every single day, is being led by the science. And the WhatsApp messages that have concerned me the most are the ones that are not showing that they were going against the science or showing that they were less concerned.
But we also hear scientists saying how annoyed they are by politicians continually repeating we were following the science, because they say the science just presents you with the facts, but it is not making decisions, and politicians have to decide. I mean, Professor Spiegelhalter, who is a renowned statistician, we heard a lot from him during COVID, was saying this only last night. He says, I wish politicians would stop saying we were following the science. They were making the decisions.
Absolutely. Decisions had to be made, and, you know, people in positions of leadership have got to make decisions, and that was the case. But the decisions were led by the science. You know, that is the case. So if the science was, it is really appropriate that we close schools in January of 2021. You know, that was the decision that was then taken. If the science said children are going to be major vectors of transmission at this time, that was the decision that needed to be taken.
But we know on masks, for example, that Chris Whitty, who was the Chief Medical Officer at the time, was pretty ambivalent about whether children wearing masks in schools, whether it helped or not. But of course, in Scotland, you were the first to go for putting masks.
Yeah, and then apparently
so the science wasn't necessarily leading in that direction.
The UK then said that they were going to follow masks because it was just easier to do what Scotland had done. On that one, that's what it apparently said in the WhatsApp messages that were there. But you know, we were taking these decisions on the best evidence that we could possibly have. I think, you know, in terms of the public inquiry, we need to make sure that we are as prepared as possible. We understand where the mistakes were made and that people are held to account where they made the wrong decision for the wrong reasons.
Tom?
I find it very bizarre to think that Nicola Sturgeon can be whiter than white on COVID. We've just heard this example here when Scotland decided that all children in school must wear masks on the basis of I'm not sure what evidence. Boris Johnson in this WhatsApp group asks, well, I'm going to be asked about this today, Patrick, Sir Chris, Sir Patrick, what should I say? And they're like, well, we don't really necessarily think that masks would help that much in classrooms where children are sitting socially distanced. They might help on the margins in corridors, maybe say that, to which then the political conclusion is in this big group chat thread, oh, we might as well just say that children should wear masks because that's what Nicola Sturgeon said and we don't want the political row. So many of these conversations reveal that this was politics at play more than science. And to some extent, that's understandable. because you've got to be able to have a confidence in a government, I suppose, if you're putting out these instructions, if you're trying to change the behaviour of people. But let's not pretend it was all following the science. And certainly let's not say that Scotland has somehow was this panacea during the pandemic. You had exactly the same care home problems at the start of the pandemic in Scotland as you did in England. In fact, you had an SNP health secretary in Scotland doing the same thing that a Conservative health secretary did in England and that a Welsh health secretary did in Wales, a Labour health secretary
Just a few days after those WhatsApps, we were already, the stuff that went out on the 1st of May, we were already testing care home admissions from the community were already being tested and isolated at that point.
I'm talking about discharge into care homes. Proportionally, care home deaths were higher at the start of the pandemic
People were being
in Scotland.
tested.
But the broader issue here is that this is not new information. I don't think anyone will have read any of these exchanges and been surprised that Matt Hancock was calling for tougher restrictions and Gavin Williamson was trying to keep schools open. This isn't new. This played out on the front pages of the papers at the time. What is interesting is the particular language they use and whether they're disparaging to one group or another, and how Boris Johnson doesn't quite understand how percentages work in one exchange. It's all very funny, but ultimately I don't think we've learnt anything particularly new. There is no smoking gun, at least not at this stage. Perhaps we'll see some more things in the Sunday papers. No doubt the Telegraph will run with a front page with a new conversation for the next, perhaps, year. Who knows? But it is interesting. But it is interesting to see behind the scenes really what was going on. My overwhelming impression of this is you see lots of people trying to do the best and sort of muddle through. And Matt Hancock is trying to push for more restrictions. You have other Conservative ministers that put other priorities at higher levels. But I don't think it's a big surprise. It doesn't seem like it's Watergate.
All right. Now, a lot of you got your hands up, or quite a few of you got your hands up. There was this next question, lots of you asked about this as well. So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to move on and just make sure I can fit it in. From Andrew Taylor.
Good evening. Given that wholesale gas and electricity prices have been falling, should the government extend the current price cap beyond April and maintain that current price?
So what we've got is we've got wholesale gas and electricity prices are falling, but the bill for the typical household is going to go up from April. Graham, do you just want to explain why that's happening?
Sure. Well, what I'm pleased to say is that the government's been able to intervene this winter and has been paying half of all of our household energy bills, as well as supporting businesses, and that has made a tremendous difference in
So why are those people here going to be paying more when the wholesale price is going down?
Well, the energy suppliers, so you've got energy generators, then you've got energy suppliers, because they have to buy their energy ahead, they have bought ahead, which means that they go on the future prices, and therefore it takes a while for the wholesale prices. So when prices went up, there was a delay before those prices came
that's not the reason. Surely it's because the government subsidy is going down. So you've got the energy price cap, which is a ceiling set by Ofgem on how much companies can charge us for energy. That's been in existence since 2019, and that is going down to reflect... It's going down now, not later, going down now, or from April, to reflect the drop in wholesale prices. At the same time, the government's subsidy for bills, which we've had since the energy crisis, is being cut from April overall. So typically, bills will go up. That's actually the reason, isn't it?
Well, I was asked specifically about why, with falling wholesale prices were going up, and that is because energy companies have had to buy ahead. Now, there is also, additionally, there is the fact that the £2,500 cap for average usage that the government brought in is rising from April to £3,000. So the protection is being reduced because to give people time to adjust, it is enormously expensive to get the balance between protecting people and also protecting the public purse. But for people who were on benefits, in addition to the £900 by direct subsidy of your bills, plus £400, which hopefully you've seen in your £66 or £67 a month bills, in addition to that, those on benefits received £650. So for someone in a smaller home with around a £2,000 bill, pretty much their whole bills in those cases being paid. And this coming year, we're raising that to £900 for everyone on benefits, plus payments for those with disabilities and pensioners. So we're trying flat out, and have been, and I've been at the centre of it, working to find the right way to get the balance where we had to help everybody and then move to making sure that we do still help everybody, but we help the most vulnerable the most.
Kirsty.
Because of the change in prices, the government has got an underspend on this. There's £15 billion extra that the government was intending to be spending on this. So the government has got that money. Now, what we're asking for is for that money to
to continue the subsidy
yeah,
at the level it currently is.
Because of the reduction in the wholesale prices. So we are asking for that money to be given to the people that are paying the energy bills. You know, it is the case that food's gone up 17.1%, right? This is not the only increase in cost that people are seeing. People are really, really struggling. I mean, you guys will be seeing it in your surgeries. People are coming through your door in more dire straits than I've ever seen in my time as an MP or as a councillor previously. People are really, really struggling. And the government has got the spare money that they could be putting in order to protect all of us from this increase in the prices.
Do you agree with that? In which case, why don't you?
Of course, the government is borrowing money. So when Kirsty, in that classic style of SME, talks about spare money, it isn't spare money. This is all money which will be in future taxes on people.
It's money that nonetheless you're anticipating you would spend more
and getting that balance
currently.
right. But we are absolutely determined, and we've said we will keep it under review to make sure we keep doing the right thing to protect people. We've done so through this winter, and I expect us to do so going forward.
Juergen.
Well, what fascinates me about these debates is that it's a rerun time and time again, isn't it? You know, we sort of go and we say, you know, we need support, we have these debates, government says no, and eventually government is sort of forced to say yes. And I'm going to predict here today that it won't be very long before government says, yes, we are going to extend the subsidy, because it's just the obvious and the right thing to do, because yes, it's not an
extend the
underspend.
subsidy until the point where gas prices come down sufficiently that it doesn't cost people more.
Exactly. You know, and it's not an underspend, but there is about 15 billion that thought was going to be spent that's now not. I think there's a deal to be struck with the energy companies who are making more profit out of this. By the way, I'm not generally a fan of windfall taxes, but this is genuinely a windfall, and this is genuinely huge hardship for people here in Sunderland. So just, you know, just do a deal and make an extension for, you know, another 3 months. By the way, there is the beast from the east coming. It's going to carry on being pretty cold. It can be here on the coast, and just help our communities through this difficult time.
Let's hear from the woman right at the back.
I don't agree with what the Conservative MP is saying. I've been following the gas prices on the BBC website, on the commodities section, and in July last year, the GB UK futures price was 369. It's now 118. It's gone down 2/3. Why are we not seeing the benefit of that reduction?
Yeah. OK. And here in the pink shirt.
Yeah, I just want to say I fully agree with the gentleman from Siemens as well. I'm not a huge fan of the windfall tax to begin with. When the debate last year was introduced about the windfall tax, my personal opinion is that would just put off energy companies for further investment. I do agree with Graham and the government as well, their support for households across the country and businesses. And finally, I just want to quickly just add, I do fully support Isabel Oakeshott in bringing truth to power in the previous question. And I think she deserves my personal credit. I think she deserves a lot of credit for what she did. That was bravery and courage. She spoke truth to power, and I'm going to praise her right now.
OK. And here in the red sweater.
I would like to see the oil companies that are making billions, and we see it in the newspapers every day when people are struggling, and the government is saying they have to borrow money. Why not, as a windfall tax, take something off them?
This conversation is so depressing because it's the symptom of 30 years of policy failure. The fact that we're at the whim of global prices and that the government at one point thought it might be spending £150 billion subsidising our energy. That's twice the cost of furlough. The fact that we're at that point is a failure and, frankly, a plague on all of your houses, because every single party has got us to this point. Whether it's nuclear power, the last nuclear power station to be approved in this country, to be fully built, was approved by Margaret Thatcher in 1988. It was finished before I was born. We haven't constructed a new nuclear power station since then. And that's a failure of the Conservative Party, that's a failure of the Labour Party as well, and of the SNP, who in government have banned new nuclear power in Scotland. They have legislated to ban it. Or if we take oil and gas, we have got the wealth of oil and gas off the North Sea. The Labour Party has said that it would explore no new oil fields. The SNP has, in their energy strategy, a presumption against exploration. But it's not just oil and gas, it's also wind farms. It's wind farms, because the Conservative Party have banned onshore wind farms. Companies want to build these things, many communities want to have them, and the Tories have banned them. But it's not just wind farms, it's solar farms as well. Guess what? The Green Party. The Green Party has been campaigning against solar farms. Whether it's the Longfield solar farm, or the Derbyshire solar farm, or the Hastings Park solar array, all of these have been campaigned against by local Green councillors. I don't think there's a single form of energy production in this country that a politician, or across-the-board politicians, have supported. We live in a country now where every single politician, every single political party from each direction find reasons to say no, to stop development, to stop growth, to stop our own homegrown energy. Frankly, I don't care if it's shale gas, if it's fracking, if it's wind, if it's solar, if it's nuclear, if it's oil, if it's gas. I don't care. Just build it. Just do it.
I'll get back to the question. The cap should not rise.
I want you to answer Tom as well.
Well, OK, I'll come back to that. But the cap should not rise. No ifs or buts. The money doesn't need to be borrowed. I do recognise the government did what we asked for, which is...
Where's it going to come from?
From windfall tax. No, the difference is, I recognise Graham's point that they did do what we asked to do and use the windfall tax for some of the revenue. Some subtle differences we would do differently. We'd tax at the same level as the Norwegians. That's only a small rise. We wouldn't have the loopholes for further oil and gas investment. That's not what we need in this country right now. And we'd start the tax when the windfall accrued. I accept your point, Juergen. I think in normal conditions, windfall taxes are not the kind of policy you'd want, but this is a genuine windfall from the investment, from what has happened in Ukraine and the spike in the price around that. It's not just about the social justice side of that, though clearly that is incredibly important. The economy as a whole will suffer if people have to spend even further money on their energy bills. And I think the case is very, very strong to not see that cap rise. And I think, frankly, if we don't see something like that in the budget, people will be very, very, quite rightly aggrieved by that. Just on Tom's point, look, there are politicians, Tom, in this country who essentially take, I would say, the easier route and oppose all forms of development. I myself often make the case to my own constituents that we need houses in this country because working people should be able to own their own houses. It's not always a popular case to make, but there are those of us who are willing to make that case. Specifically on nuclear, every nuclear power station in this country had its life extended under the last Labour government because the technology allowed us to do that. Because we needed them by the end of that and we lost power, but we extended the life because that was by far the better cost option.
You were in power for 13 years.
Exactly.
You could have built... it takes about 10 years to build a nuclear power station, and the issue is, every single time they're proposed, Nick Clegg said this in a famously viral video in 2012, we couldn't possibly build a new nuclear power station because it wouldn't come on stream until 2022. And what would be the use in that? This is the short-termism in our politics. It's a presumption against development. Dare I say it? It's an anti-growth coalition of all different parties, whether it's the Conservative Party stopping wind farms or the Labour Party stopping oil and gas or the SNP stopping nuclear power. They're all at it. They are all at it.
OK. All right, I'm going to hit a couple of points to the audience before I move on. Yes, person here in the check shirt.
Hello there. Yeah, I just want to say I disagree with the Conservative MP in that even if we were to accept the fiscal idea of a government as similar to a citizen in which its only way to get money to fund subsidies is to borrow money, which it's really not, but I don't want to get into that complexity of economics right now. But even if the UK was to borrow money now, in 10 or 20 years, wouldn't an increased tax base justify? Wouldn't an increased tax base help pay for the subsidies that you're borrowing now to functionally?
Thank you. Thank you for your point. Yes, and the woman here. I'm to take one last point before I move on. Yes.
Tom described the discussion as very depressing and then went on. We've had some very theoretical discussions and some historical analysis. But I can show you what's really depressing. And what's depressing is the level of poverty in areas of this town and very many other towns up and down the North East. So the question about the £67 £40 isn't a theoretical question. This is a very real question which is going to impact on people's lives over the next few months.
Okay. And very quickly.
You're so right, because there is very real poverty in this country. And it's because we don't build anything anymore. We need industry. We need to be having people building those wind farms, building those solar farms, making those nuclear power stations.
All right, Tom.
And the market wants to do it. The politicians keep stopping them.
Tom, I can tell you feel very passionate about it. You've made your point. You're making the same point again, so I'm going to move on.
Can I say anything?
You got about...
Just say, we have, in 2012, 40% of our electricity came from coal. By 2 years ago, it was 2%. Next year, it'll be none. And we've basically... And where we've gone to is about that 40% now comes from renewables. There's been this transformation. We have been building in the North Sea. The North Sea's other amazing asset. We've had oil and gas from there, and while we're importing and using oil and gas, and we will be for decades to come, we should produce our own to high standards. What we shouldn't do is oppose. As Tom rightly says, we've got to get on with building things, and that's exactly what this Conservative government is doing.
Hang on, all sorts of people are shouting out, and I can't tell... Who was shouting out there?
By renewables, what do you mean? Because 40% of it now comes from gas. And in terms, another question, what's the government's actual plan? Because the cost of energy isn't going to go back down to what it was. It's now sourced from the likes of LNG and other sources from Qatar. They're putting massive risk premiums in. So what's the actual plan? Because this isn't going back down over the course of the next 4 or 5 years.
Just quickly, the expectation is that prices will come down as production goes. It's a market. It responds to high prices. You get more production. That's how it works. But we're going flat out to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. So you saw in our last year's auction, we saw the biggest ever amount of renewables. For the next 5 years, while this energy transition goes on, what's the plan for the midterm? For 5 years, are they just going to stay at this price? Because you're trying to get away from Russian dependency. I know we don't get that much from there, but then again, you're going to try and transition to green energy, which is wind farms, solar. They're going to take years to build. So what's the plan? We're building them flat out now.
But what's the medium-term plan? That's what you're asking, isn't it? For the next 5 years, what's the plan to keep bills down?
Well, one of the things we have to do, and unfortunately the Labour Party and the SNP, while we are users of gas, about 75% of our energy today is from fossil fuel, they're saying we shouldn't explore in the North Sea. Our gas in the North Sea has lower emissions than the stuff we're bringing in from Qatar. It makes no sense, environmentally, economically, or anything else, not to maximise our returns from the North Sea, even as we build more renewables as fast as we can.
This man here in the front.
What you haven't mentioned is water. They spend millions and millions and millions on something that works for 20% of the time. Use the water. It'll work 100% of the time and it'll last forever. There hasn't been any investment in water. We're going to need water. Water from my time as a child, where one parent went to the baths 1 week, and now people are having 2 showers a day. Now, we need water. We need something to be done about it. Use the 2 of them. Reservoirs that haven't got turbines in, put casings down. Has anybody done anything at all about that? Yes. Not a penny, not a... It's so blindingly obvious.
Now, we've only got about 5 minutes left. I was going to go to another subject, but I think I'm going to keep this going because there are lots of hands up and lots of people want to make their voices heard. Yes, the man there in the green shirt, in the green jacket.
Yeah. There's like windfall taxes on the oil and gas companies. Would it not be better just to renationalise energy and then the profits can be put back in there?
Well, Jonathan, that's exactly what your party plans to do. But you've changed your mind now.
No, I think, to be honest, if you look at the... where those profits are accruing is in the production side, and it is not feasible to nationalise multinational companies on that scale, and it wouldn't give the kind of relief. I think I understand the frustrations people have and why people look sometimes to that.
You did pledge to renationalise energy.
No, we didn't. Not
all sorts of things.
Not the likes of
not
Shell
that
and
particular
BP.
one.
I mean, you're talking about enormous companies of tremendous resources would be required to do that, and frankly, I think that would be a distraction from getting the support to people when they really need it. It's much easier and much better to say this is where you get the money from. Don't see the cap rise in April because people can't afford that.
OK. Man there in the waistcoat and jacket combo.
Thank you. I think the real problem is the growing wealth inequality, and none of the political parties seem to want to address that. It's been growing greater than it ever has done over the last few years, and certainly since the pandemic. And unless you address that, there's always going to be people that can't afford their bills.
Yeah. Okay. The man in the grey sweatshirt there.
I just want to kind of go back to the point of you saying that you have to borrow that money, but you budgeted to actually do that to April 2024, and there's actually prediction models that'll show that the actual Ofgem cap will be below the EPG by June. So why not just leave it for 3 months, and then you won't have to spend or borrow anything, and we can kind of follow and absorb those reduction in wholesale prices.
And when you say the EPG, you mean the Energy Price Guarantee, which is a subsidy that the government is paying. I mean, that's the point that a lot of people are making. Just keep it going for a bit longer, and then, A, you help people over that transition, is what Juergen's making, and actually, if prices come down...
People will use less anyway, because it's
the gentleman makes a very good point, and we keep it under review.
So should we expect to see a change then, which is what Juergen thinks? Oh, come on. Listen, what are you, Minister for Energy Security and Net Zero? If anyone knows, it should be you. Come on, Graham, let's hear it. Is this position sustainable for the government, or do you think it will change?
We have, as I said, we've intervened on an unprecedented scale precisely...
No, you said that already.
Exactly.
So in response, when you say watch this space...
And we will continue to keep it under review.
The budget's coming up. The Chancellor likes to have a rabbit to pull out of a hat at the budget. But what it does mean is, in the meantime, you know, people are suffering from this uncertainty. It is freezing. You know, it is really cold. People cannot afford to have people can't afford to have 2 showers a day. People can't afford to have 1 shower a week because of the cost of the hot water. You know, people are really, really struggling. I think the wealth inequality is a major issue that we are seeing. We've done an awful lot of things in Scotland, particularly around improving our child poverty rate. So it's now 6 percentage points below the ones that there are down here because of what we have put in, because of the Scottish Child Payment that will give children, by the time that they go to school, by the time they're 6, 10 grand the family will be getting, which compares to £1,800 of equivalent benefits in the UK. Now, we are doing that because we want to reduce child poverty, because we recognise it's a massive issue for creating that wealth inequality. And, you know, if
the Scottish Government could also, in order... I mean, it's up to you how you spend your money, but obviously if the government is reducing its subsidy, you could step in and just give a bit more to top that up.
We have, you know, Graham was talking about borrowing. The thing is that the Scottish Government can't borrow in the same way as the UK Government has. We've got a legal responsibility to have a balanced budget on an annual basis. We can't
Graham
do
just
it.
said fortune. I don't know if you heard
we
that.
don't have to... Well, do you know what? It would be great if we were an independent country and we could do this, and we could make our own decisions.
All right, OK. Let me hear a bit more from the audience. Let me hear a bit more from the audience. The person at the very back in the glasses.
Much has been made of windfall taxes, and the Conservative ministers there said that the money wasn't spare, that it was being borrowed. But the reality is that there are many corporations in this country who don't pay their taxes fairly, who utilise tax havens and loopholes to escape from payment. Amazon, for instance, through tax deductions and such, failed to pay £800 million in 2021. So when we're talking about these taxes, it shouldn't just be windfalls from when these companies manage to be doing well, but consistent taxation system, a closure of the loopholes across the board that would not only manage to increase government income, though albeit to alienate some Tory donors, but fundamentally an economic system that would allow the government to make huge amounts of revenue off the taxes that these companies should be paying.
You put your point very well. I'm afraid we are out of time, so I'm afraid I can't take that back to the panel. Forgive me. What you missed out on was that you were all going to be asked, should we all delete TikTok from our phones? So I leave you to ponder that. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to all of you here. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience here in Sunderland for putting your points so passionately, so strongly. Great to hear from you. And thank you, of course, to you at home for watching. Next week, we're in London, week after in Warrington, live on the iPlayer every week at 8 o'clock, but otherwise, of course, on BBC One at 10:40. Thanks very much for watching from Question Time. Bye-bye.